What is it that created the illusion that we individuals are so separate from one another? Besides the virtual technological internet connection, modern society is fragmented in ways unknown to the world for most of history. In the United States, family units are often broken with divorce and mental issues, and the rarely talked about sexual misconduct and physical and mental abuse. The connection to the tribe or local community is lost in many areas, especially high-density neighborhoods and inner cities. We live in our fancy box-shaped houses and zoom around on the slick roads in our shiny rectangle boxes so we can go to work in cubicles and stare into boxes. Even the shapes of our organization are not the shapes evident in nature. Children are seated in rows rather than circles in school. Punishment begins early with solitary confinement methods, such as detention or getting kicked out of class. Find a square leaf or a box-shaped planet. Where are the rows and columns in nature's wisdom? This section is intended to reignite the knowledge we were all born with. We are part of a larger living system. A quote from Herman Melville. "We cannot live for ourselves alone. Our lives are connected by 1,000 invisible threads, and along these sympathetic fibers, our actions run as causes and return to us as results." How could humans survive without each other? The reality TV show Alone explores the difficulty of being alone and trying to survive. One thing that becomes evident is that loneliness is more of a problem than the survival aspect. Most of us would not survive alone very long if left to our own devices, without the help of other people. Humans are not a solitary species. Part of our joy and well-being depends on our ability to communicate and get along well with other humans. Viktor Frankl said that our deepest desire is to have meaning in our lives. And when you consider what that really means, is in some way or another actively working to help other humans. I myself would really struggle to survive without the help of others. Beyond other humans, we are completely dependent on the plants, animals, and minerals of the earth for our survival. Every part of the tapestry of life is interwoven with the rest. Humans are not a solitary species. Part of our joy and well-being depends on our ability to communicate and get along well with other humans. Viktor Frankl said that our deepest desire is to have meaning in our lives. And when you consider what that really means, is in some way or another actively working to help other humans. I myself would really struggle to survive in the wild without the help of others. This is an excerpt from the movie called Mind Walk, which is about a philosophy discussion between a poet, a physicist, and a politician. There was much discussed in the film, and I highly recommend it if you have not seen it yet, or even if it's been a really long time.
Are complex, but you're just looking at the dark side because so's our capacity to respond, isn't it? Communications, data banks, technology. We already have the tools to deal with a lot of these problems, even if they are more complex.
Candide himself, the eternal optimist.
But don't you see that all these new technologies, they're causing more problems than they solve? In medicine, for example, there's been an overwhelming increase in technology, but the costs have spiraled concurrently. It's become medicine for the rich. And public health hasn't improved significantly, although public health would improve dramatically if we just changed our eating habits, for example. But instead, the experts are occupied with making artificial hearts, But if our agribusiness had fed us better instead of chopping down the rainforests in order to make cattle ranches, in order to produce more and more red meat, which is one of the direct causes of heart attacks, then maybe we wouldn't have to spend so much of our money on artificial hearts, and so on and so on. Well, this is all examples of interconnectedness. Examples of interconnectedness. Interconnectedness.
All right, supposing that you're right and everything is connected to everything else, as you say. Still, you've got to start somewhere, don't you? So that's the real political question here. Where do you start?
By changing the way we're seeing the world. You see, you're still searching for the right piece to fix first. You don't see that all the problems simply are fragments of one single crisis. A crisis of perception.
A crisis of perception.
The look on the politician's face in this scene seemed fitting to describe what I see as the real issue, or stumbling block, in attempts to end evil. In order to change things for the better in the world, first, we must recognize that there is a problem. We have to change everything, together, at the same time, the ideals, the institutions, the values. The physicist manages to say in one sentence what is so hard to imagine: the road to changing human experience from evil to goodness. As wild and unlikely as it sounds, if it can be imagined, it can come to fruition. Think how quickly a new style or fad travels through certain age groups. Or a really funny cat video that goes viral. What if the goal of ending evil in human experience became viral? Researchers of our ancient past tell of a time when humans might have reached a higher level of vibration in knowledge, lifestyle, technology, and connection to nature. Check out Michael Tessarian's Origin and Oracle series. I want to break apart one specific slide from that series that really struck me. I'm not sure where he took it from, but it is a book's worth of knowledge in one page. What man considers his independence is mere hyper-alienation from himself and from the world. His ability to tolerate such an existential predicament has been increased by the conditioning of the false theocracies which have created intricate surrogate pacifiers for the lost reality which he inwardly misses and creates. Man's attachments to these simulacras become the reasons for further alienation. The spell is broken only for those whose inner voice is heard over the clamor of lies which besiege the brain and the senses from all quarters. Now that was a lot to take in, so let's take it apart in pieces. From birth, as humans, we are born needing the help of other humans, who in turn need the gifts of the fruit of the planet, nature, to sustain their life and the life of the new human child. We are connected as the umbilical cord, like the roots of the tree to the leaves. The symbolism here is representing that the tree of life means all life. Humans, plants, and animals, and life are part of one living system. The tree of life represented man's intimate, umbilical rapport with nature and the universal order. Its forbidden fruit refers to his sustenance by being non-differentiated from nature. So, trying to pretend we are something different or better than nature, plants, animals, minerals, rather than a family member of the greater community, we become strange astronauts from outer space, as if we don't belong here. Hyper-alienated, creating our own island. The deeper nature of human really can't stand this illusion of separation, this blocking of the natural flow of energy. We create belief systems and rely on temporary, good feelings to make up for the missing feeling of being one with our planet's natural systems, or the all. Like a baby without its mother, we cling at anything we can find and follow it like a baby bird. In steps, the authoritarian structure of religion or government or drugs or alcohol become the surrogate mother. What man considers his independence is mere hyper-alienation from himself and from the world. His ability to tolerate such an existential predicament has been increased by the conditioning of the false theocracies which have created intricate surrogate pacifiers for the lost reality which he inwardly misses and craves. The harder we try to separate from our Mother Earth, the more we are left feeling lost and alone, which in turn causes depression, sadness, anger, fear, confusion, and sickness. It takes a very brave soul to listen through all the chaos, distractions, and illusions, as in the hidden picture, to hear the call of the one true voice of creation. All is oneness. Man's attachment to these simulacra become the reasons for further alienation. The spell is broken only for those whose inner voice is heard over the clamor of lies, which besiege the brain and the senses from all quarters. I talked before about the importance of looking up words and how words are very powerful and the very fabric of the reality. Philosophy is made up of words. So what's interesting is when we start looking at words, there is this sort of secret word magic in it, where words mean things, like spell. Letters are used to spell a word. And in the idea of magic, you would create a spell to enact some change using the physical forces of the universe. Another interesting word, the word itself, word, if you take the S and put it on front of the word, it says sword, which is much like the pen is mightier than the sword. Or, yes, same thing. Another little important thing I took out of the Bible, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, was with God, and the Word was God. So there's a lot of inherent truth meaning in that statement. The word responsibility has two words in it, response and ability. If we do have the ability to respond to a problem, then we have a response ability to do something about it. Now, when you start looking into the mystery schools, esoteric knowledge, which means knowledge held by few, I should say, you find out that the old goofy saying we heard as kids, abracadabra, actually means, or comes from the meaning to mean, what I speak is what I create. So words have power. The world of the unseen creates or sparks the world of the seen and observed. We do this with our spells. We do have this power. Unluckily, this knowledge has been held by a very few amount of people, and most of the masses have been ignorant to this knowledge. This is why it's called occult. Such knowledge has been deliberately hidden in order to create and maintain a power differential between those who hold it and those who are ignorant of it. An important distinction to make. I mentioned that the occult means hidden in part 2, But here's a more complete definition with some etymology. The occult. The word occult is rooted in the Latin adjective occultus, which means hidden from sight, which comes from the Latin verb occultare, to hide or conceal, to keep secret. Both are in turn derived from the Latin noun oculus, eye. So the picture there shows the iceberg, which is a great metaphor for kind of like the hidden picture thing I'd mentioned before. We see the small caps coming out of the water, but the bigger picture is what's below the water. And that's what we are discussing in the End Evil series. Also, as I listen to myself speaking, that the word cult sounds very similar, but has a very different meaning, as it turns out. The two words do not seem to be necessarily related as far as the root or the etymology, according to a site I frequent called etymonline.com, etymonline.com. A cult basically means an extremist, authoritarian-based religious sect. So that's very different from the occult, the occult.
We live in a world of correction, which will continue to correct until there's no defect that needs correction. And this applies to individuals and to nations. We are going to have all kinds of dismal occurrences until we begin to live the principles which we all know to be true. Of the 6 billion people we now have in the world, approximately, probably 4 billion of those people are religious. They believe in some kind of a God. They believe in some kind of a golden rule. They believe in some kind of a table of commandments. They all have the same basic concept, and that is refrain from evil, practice the good, and continue to hope for the future. If therefore we all have this in common, why is it not obvious? Why do people in the name of religion murder each other? Yet they have been doing so from the beginning of time. And they have bred nothing but war, disaster, difficulty, and death. Even today, sorrow is being generated all over the world by fanaticism, self-interest, selfishness, and these things. And what are they? They are simply the extreme examples of a system which is wrong from the beginning. This is the final fruit of wrong thinking, wrong living, and wrong believing.
Manly P. Hall points out that it is up to each one of us as individuals to learn to respect the laws of nature in order to bring balance to humanity as a whole. Deep understanding is found in ancient hidden knowledge that we are all connected, and our communal decisions affect the whole of mankind. The way to repair damage in this system is done on an individual level, and then a process of learning and teaching the principles to others that guide our existence.
One great, harmonious, happy unity. Except man will not permit it to do this. He insists on endangering it. He insists on damaging a beautiful necessity in order to achieve some cheap success of his own. So as we're coming time now towards the end of this century, the time has come for a more or less careful estimation of what's going to happen. That we are not going to be wiped out, but we are going to be forced to reconsider action which is obviously wrong. The more rapidly we accept this and the more quickly we correct our mistakes, the easier these transitions are going to be. We will not have to suffer some horrible disaster if each of us as an individual that really tries to improve the allotment which was given to us in the beginning. Each of us has a certain magnetic keynote, a certain value, and if we live up to that value, we are safe. If we disrupt that value and fall below its level, we are in danger. And in danger we remain until we correct ourselves. Now, you know you're correcting yourself when you begin to feel good about things, when you say to yourself, all these things are working together for good, if you can begin to see the lesson in each problem, and by seeing the lesson dissipate the problem, by watching for opportunities to learn more about the life in which we exist, to gain greater sharing in life, realizing the value of unselfishness as against selfishness, the value of peace as against conflict. All these things we learn. Children can learn them. It is time for education to teach us that the purpose of life is to grow and improve, that the great work of life is not to be measured in a career here, but in an unfoldment of the basic character of the individual.
To live in the world without becoming aware of the meaning of the world is like wandering about in a great library without touching the books. It has always seemed to me that symbolism should be restored to the structure of world education. The young are no longer invited to seek the hidden truths, dynamic and eternal, locked within the shapes and behavior of living beings. To live in the world without becoming aware of the meaning of the world is like wandering around in a great library without touching the books. Just like I was describing before, being in the mall and seeing that weird design and not knowing that there's a hidden picture in it, because no one told you. The optimist in me hopes that humans can ignite against the tyrannical force of evil, which threatens to take over, like the Borg in Star Trek. We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to serve us. Resistance is futile. Sci-fi often tells the truth or the future. Check out Animal Farm, 1984, A Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451. Authors like Orwell, Huxley, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, just to name a few. This negative imagery represents the true desire of the evil intentions of the Dark Orders to enslave humankind, which is a shadow version of the true unity which already exists in nature. Some terms to research are globalist agenda, New World Order, the people and their associates who repeat that phrase and their connection to what is called the technocracy. The tentacles of this real plan and conspiracy are right out in the open, but hard to believe, and harder for most to look at with an honest, logical point of view. Another thing to look at is the Trilateral Commission, co-founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller and Brzezinski. And this was an idea introduced in a Bilderberg meeting, which is another important place to see where this type of Borg mentality has been formed for many years. So let's understand a little more word magic. The etymological root of the word natural. The English word nature is etymologically derived from the ancient Comitian Egyptian word neter, meaning God, symbolized hieroglyphically as a simple stylized flag on a pole, stylized in other cultures as a cleaving axe, which represented a force which was known to exist through its observable effects, like wind, but difficult or impossible to see with the eye. Neter was actually pronounced netcher, extremely close to the English pronunciation of nature, netcher. Observable effects, inherent truths, self-evident truths. Notice the theme and continuity here in these words and understandings. It is not something new that we just made up. This has been existing. This knowledge has been on this planet for a long time. To really sum up the important concept for this section of End Evil, I want to give a chance for Mark Passio to say it better than I think anyone else can.
Natural law, therefore, is a set of universal, non-man-made, binding, and unchangeable conditions which govern the behavioral consequence of beings with the capacity for holistic intelligence. Natural law governs the aggregate or collective free will behavioral choices of entire populations by manifesting the consequences of the behaviors that we choose. The consequences which we receive are always dependent upon whether our chosen behaviors are either moral or immoral, or in other words, right or wrong.
The most important lesson of all hidden esoteric knowledge, and the key to repairing the damage to ourselves and our race, is summed up in the meaning of natural law. It basically is the same as the golden rule in application. Natural law, equality in rights. Now we think of civil rights here in this country and in others as well, as Canada and many other countries use that term, but natural law is a much more complete understanding of the way things are and could be if we were not working against nature. And that would be that everyone has the same exact rights. No one has any more or less rights than anyone else. Since rights are not created by humanity because they exist objectively and inherently in nature, no human being or group of human beings is actually capable of granting rights to anyone else. Nor is any human being capable of revoking rights from anyone else. Now, what's difficult to understand about this is that we see so much cases in the world, kind of like the Borg, as I described, where this natural law and equality is being stomped all over, and people are causing coercion and hurting others. And this, to just call an illusion, is frustrating because we see the reality of what happens when the law is broken. We get sickness. A sickness of the mind and a sickness in reality in the world, in the functionings of how we do things.
Who transformed it into scientific theory, into power.
They got us keep from single vision and Newton's sleep. William Blake.
I'm very impressed.
No, you two have a lot in common. You have a lot to talk about. He was writing in poetry 200 years ago what you're saying today in prose. He hated Newton. He hated the concept of single vision. He dedicated his entire life to making art that denied single vision. Of course, the people of his time thought he was a crank.
Whereas they revered Newton almost as a god. By reducing all physical phenomena to the motion of material particles, the motion caused by the force of gravity, he was able to describe the exact effect of gravity on any object with precise mathematical equations. We call it Newton's laws of motion. Really the great achievement of 17th century science.
You mean all that stuff that I slept through in high school, like any good poet, all that square root of the hypotenuse divided by a pinch of magnesium, all that stuff?
Well, in the right hands, or should I say, aroused minds, these equations seem to work beautifully. I could use Newton's equations to calculate and explain every motion of that throw, from the ballistic curve to the ripples in the water. See, this was a feat so impressive for the time that Newton's mathematical system immediately established itself as the correct theory of reality, the ultimate laws of nature. Descartes' dream of the world as a perfect machine was now an established fact. It brought with it such a wealth of benefits for people. People could do things they'd never been able to do before. It was irresistible. And of course, the old notions of the world as a living organism was swept away.
So what's wrong with Newton?
So what's wrong with Newton?